I remember one ride that still makes me uneasy whenever I think about it. It happened during one of my late-night Uber shifts a few years ago. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But looking back now, I'm pretty sure something about that ride wasn't normal, and honestly, I still don't have a good explanation for what happened that night. It was around 2:30 in the morning when the ride request came in. At that hour, the city feels completely different. The streets that are normally packed with traffic during the day become quiet and almost hollow. Streetlights stretch across empty roads, and every now and then you see someone walking alone on a sidewalk, usually someone leaving a bar or heading home after a late shift. I had been driving for about 4 hours already that night. Driving late nights was something I started doing after my office job to make extra money. Surge pricing was usually better after midnight, and honestly, the rides were usually pretty easy. Most passengers were just tired people who wanted to get home. When the request popped up on my phone, I glanced at the pickup location. It was an apartment complex about 10 minutes away. Pretty normal. So I accepted the ride and started driving. The neighborhood I was heading toward was a quieter part of the city. Mostly older apartment buildings and small side streets. Nothing fancy, but also not the kind of place where you'd expect trouble. When I turned onto the street, I immediately noticed how quiet it was. Not just empty, quiet. There's a difference. Usually even late at night you hear something. A car passing somewhere in the distance. Someone talking. Maybe a dog barking. But the street felt still. The apartment building itself was dimly lit, with only a couple of lights glowing from windows on the upper floors. I pulled up to the curb and checked the app again. The ride was still active, but something about it caught my attention. There was no destination listed. At first I figured it was just a glitch. Sometimes passengers forget to enter their destination when requesting a ride. Usually they tell you once they get in the car. So I waited. About 20 seconds later, a man stepped out from the walkway leading to the apartment building. He walked slowly toward the car. I noticed right away that he didn't seem drunk or distracted like a lot of late-night passengers. His movements were calm and deliberate. He opened the back door and got in without saying anything. The door shut quietly behind him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Hey," I said casually. "Where are we headed tonight?" The man was sitting perfectly still in the back seat. Then he said something that immediately made the situation feel strange. "Just drive." I let out a small laugh. "All right, but where to?" His voice stayed completely calm. "Just drive." Something about the way he said it made me hesitate. Normally, I would have insisted on a destination before starting the ride. But at that hour, I didn't feel like arguing with a passenger. So I pulled away from the curb and started driving. At first, the ride felt normal enough. The roads were empty, and the city lights flickered past the windshield as we moved through quiet intersections. A few minutes passed before the man spoke again. "Turn left up here." His voice came from the darkness behind me. I followed the direction and turned down a smaller street. Then the silence returned. A couple minutes later, he spoke again. "Right at the next one." Again, I followed the instruction. At this point, I started realizing something. We weren't heading toward any particular part of the city. We were just moving through random streets. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. "So, where are you headed exactly?" I asked. No response. I glanced in the rearview mirror again. That's when I noticed something that made me uneasy. The man was staring directly at me through the mirror. Not casually. Not like someone who just happened to be looking forward. He was watching me, completely still. I looked back at the road. The quiet in the car suddenly felt heavier. A few minutes passed before he gave another direction. Left. By now we were driving through a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The streetlights were further apart, and some of the houses looked abandoned. The kind of area where the city lights don't quite reach. That's when something else caught my attention. I checked the mirror again. The man hadn't moved. Not even slightly. Most passengers shift around in the seat, check their phone, or look out the window. But this guy had been sitting in the exact same position since he got in the car. Then I noticed something even stranger. He hadn't blinked. I hadn't seen him blink. I told myself I was probably imagining things. After all, I couldn't have been watching him every second. Still, the thought stuck in my mind. We drove like that for almost 20 minutes. Random turns, empty streets, occasional directions from the back seat. Eventually the man leaned forward slightly. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "You should stop the car, right here." I slowed down and looked ahead. We were beside an old industrial building. The place looked abandoned. Most of the windows were boarded up, and the streetlight nearby flickered weakly over cracked pavement. For a moment, I hesitated. Then something in my gut told me to look ahead again. And that's when I saw someone standing in the shadows. A second person. They were near the edge of the building, half hidden in darkness. Just standing there, watching the car. The moment I saw that figure, a wave of panic rushed through me. Without saying a word, I pressed the gas pedal and drove straight past the building. The man in the back seat didn't react. He didn't yell, didn't tell me to stop. He simply leaned back into his seat again. The silence in the car became almost unbearable. A few blocks later, he finally spoke. "Pull over at the corner." I stopped the car. The man opened the door and stepped out. He closed the door quietly behind him. Then he walked down the sidewalk without looking back. The moment the door shut, I glanced at my phone. And that's when something strange happened. The ride ended automatically. No destination had ever been entered. I checked the passenger details in the app. The account had no name, no profile picture, no information at all. And when I refreshed the ride history later that night, the trip wasn't even there. It was like the ride had never existed. And sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I had stopped that car beside that building. Another ride that still bothers me happened about a year after that first experience. By then I had been driving Uber long enough that very little surprised me anymore. I'd picked up passengers from all kinds of places: bars, airports, late-night diners, even the occasional hospital. Most of the time the rides were completely normal. But one request I received around 3 in the morning still doesn't make sense to me. That night had been pretty slow. It was the middle of the week, and the city felt unusually quiet. Even the downtown streets, which normally had at least a few people walking around at that hour, seemed almost empty. I had just dropped off a passenger and was about to head toward a busier area when a new ride request popped up. The pickup location immediately caught my attention. It was a street I knew very well. Not because it was popular, but because it had been closed for construction for months. The road was located near the edge of the city where a new residential development had been planned. The project had started a year earlier but stalled halfway through. Now the area mostly consisted of unfinished houses, empty lots, and temporary construction fences. I had driven past the entrance of that road dozens of times. And every time, it was blocked off with large barriers. Which is why seeing that location as a pickup spot felt strange. At first I assumed the map was slightly off. GPS locations aren't always perfect, especially in areas that are still being developed. So I accepted the ride and headed in that direction. The closer I got, the quieter the area became. Streetlights grew further apart, and the houses along the road looked older and less maintained. Eventually I reached the intersection where the closed road began. Sure enough, the construction barriers were still there. The orange barricades stretched across the entrance of the road, with reflective strips glowing faintly under my headlights. But according to the app, my passenger was waiting about 30 feet beyond those barriers. I slowed down and pulled up beside them. For a moment I just sat there, looking at the dark road beyond. The construction site was almost completely black. Tall trees surrounded the area, blocking most of the distant city lights. I checked the app again. The ride was still active, and the passenger icon was still right there, beyond the barrier. I waited. 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. No one appeared. Eventually I leaned out the window slightly, scanning the area. Nothing. Just darkness and unfinished pavement stretching into the distance. After another minute, I sighed and reached toward my phone to cancel the ride. And that's when someone tapped on the passenger side window. The sound made me jump. I turned my head quickly. A woman was standing beside the car. For a moment I just stared at her, because I had no idea where she had come from. The road behind me had been empty. and there hadn't been enough time for someone to walk up from the construction site. Yet somehow she was suddenly there, standing right next to the car. She looked to be in her early 30s. Her hair was dark and shoulder length, slightly messy like she'd been outside for a while. She wore a long gray coat that hung loosely around her shoulders. But what struck me most was her expression. She looked calm. Almost too calm for someone standing alone on a dark road at 3 in the morning. I unlocked the door. She opened it and slid into the back seat. "Hi," I said cautiously. She didn't respond. Instead, she simply handed me her destination. It was an address across town, about 15 minutes away. "All right," I said. "We'll be there soon." Then I pulled the car away from the barrier and began driving. For the first few minutes, the ride felt normal. The road opened into wider streets as we moved closer toward the center of the city. Traffic lights blinked yellow at empty intersections. The woman remained silent in the back seat. I glanced at the rearview mirror occasionally, mostly out of habit. That's when I started noticing something strange. At first it was subtle. Something about the reflection in the mirror didn't feel quite right. The woman was sitting perfectly upright in the back seat, her eyes fixed forward. But the reflection seemed off. I tried to ignore the thought. Then it happened again. I glanced up at the mirror as she adjusted her coat. Except the reflection didn't move right away. It shifted about a second later. At first I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the more I checked the mirror, the more the same thing happened. Every movement she made in the back seat appeared slightly delayed in the reflection, like the mirror was showing a moment from the past. My chest tightened slightly as the realization settled in. That wasn't possible. Mirrors don't lag. I forced myself to focus on the road. "Cold night," I said, trying to break the silence. No response. I looked at the mirror again. She was staring directly at me. Her eyes looked darker now, almost shadowed. Another minute passed. Then she spoke. "Stop near the bridge." Her voice was soft, almost distant. I glanced ahead. The bridge she mentioned crossed a small river that cut through the city. The area around it was usually quiet, especially at night. I slowed the car and pulled over near the sidewalk. The woman opened the door and stepped out. She closed the door behind her without a word. I watched her through the mirror as she walked toward the bridge. Then I looked down at my phone to end the ride. And that's when something strange happened. The ride wasn't there. The request had completely disappeared from the app. No active trip. No completed ride. Nothing. My stomach dropped. I checked the ride history. Still nothing. It was as if the request had never existed. Confused, I looked back up toward the bridge. The sidewalk was empty. The woman was gone. Not walking away. Not crossing the bridge. Just gone. I sat there for a few seconds, staring into the darkness beyond the streetlight. Then I started the car again and drove away. I told myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe a glitch in the app. Maybe I had accidentally ended the ride earlier. But the delayed reflection in the mirror, that's the part I've never been able to explain. The third experience happened during a shift that started out completely normal. By that point I had been driving Uber on and off for about a year, and late night rides had become part of my routine. Most nights followed the same pattern. Pick someone up downtown. Drive them home. Maybe stop for gas. Then repeat the cycle. But one ride around 4 in the morning still sticks with me, and even now I can't explain how it happened. That night I had been driving around the nightlife district. A lot of bars were closing around that time, so rides were coming in pretty regularly. Eventually things started slowing down. The streets emptied. Most of the lights inside the bars went dark. That's when my phone buzzed with another request. The pickup location was only a few blocks away. A convenience store near a quiet intersection. The kind of small neighborhood store that stays open late for people grabbing snacks or drinks on the way home. When I pulled into the parking lot, the place looked closed. The lights inside the store were off. The parking lot was empty, except for one man standing under a streetlight near the sidewalk. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket. His hands were in his pockets, and he was already looking directly at my car. I slowed down and pulled up beside him. Before he even opened the door, he leaned down toward the window slightly. "Good evening, Daniel." The moment I heard my name, my stomach tightened. Not because he used my first name. Uber drivers expect that. Passengers can see your name in the app. But that wasn't the name he used. The name displayed in the Uber app was Dan. Not Daniel. Only people who knew me personally used my full name. For a moment I just stared at him, trying to figure out if maybe I recognized him. But I was pretty sure I had never seen this guy before. He opened the back door and got in. The door shut behind him. I started the ride. "Where to?" I asked. He gave me an address about 15 minutes away. Just a normal residential neighborhood. I entered it into the GPS and started driving. For the first couple of minutes, the ride felt normal. Then the man spoke again. "You've been driving for Uber about a year now, right?" My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "Yeah," I said slowly. "That sounds about right." He chuckled quietly from the back seat. "You used to work evenings at that office building downtown before that." A chill crept up my spine. Because that was true. But I had never mentioned it to any passenger. I glanced at the rearview mirror. The man was looking out the window calmly, like we were just having a casual conversation. "How did you know that?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned his head slightly to the side. "People leave traces of themselves everywhere," he said. "That's how." His voice was calm. Too calm. For the next few minutes, the conversation became stranger. He mentioned the neighborhood where I grew up, a small town about an hour outside the city. Then he mentioned a park I used to visit when I was a kid, a park I hadn't thought about in years. At that point, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. "How do you know all this?" I asked. The man laughed softly. "You'd be surprised how much you can learn about someone." The car grew quiet again. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind kept racing. Eventually, he leaned forward slightly from the back seat. "You've been driving this same car for about 6 months now," he said. That part was also true. Then he added something that made the back of my neck go cold. "I've been in this car before." I frowned slightly. I think I'd remember that. He shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't notice me." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond, because something about the way he said it felt wrong. Not like he was joking, more like he was stating a simple fact. The rest of the drive passed in silence. I could feel his eyes on the back of my head the entire time. Eventually, we reached the address he had entered. It was a narrow street lined with old apartment buildings. Most of the windows were dark. Only a few streetlights illuminated the sidewalk. I pulled the car over near the curb. "Here we are," I said. The man opened the door. He stepped out of the car slowly. Then he leaned down toward the open window and smiled. "Drive safe tonight, Daniel." Then he turned and walked into a dark alley beside the building. Within seconds, he disappeared into the shadows. I ended the ride and pulled away from the curb. At that point, I just wanted to finish the shift and go home. Something about that entire ride had left me feeling unsettled. Later that morning, after I parked my car and got inside my apartment, I opened the Uber app to check my ride history. That's when I noticed something strange. The ride from earlier was still processing. Normally, the passenger name loads immediately after the trip ends. But this one hadn't. A few minutes later, the screen refreshed. The name finally appeared. I stared at the phone for several seconds. Because the name on the passenger account was mine. Not Daniel. Not Dan. My full name. Exactly the same as my driver profile. For a long time, I tried convincing myself there had to be some technical explanation. Maybe a glitch in the system. Maybe the ride got mixed up with my account somehow. But every now and then I think about something he said in the car. "I've been in this car before, you just didn't notice me." And sometimes when I drive late at night, I catch myself checking the rearview mirror, just to make sure there isn't someone sitting quietly in the back seat, watching, waiting. And if you enjoy hearing true horror stories like these late-night encounters, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Scary Stories for more unsettling stories every week. Also, let me know in the comments which story disturbed you the most tonight. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. It really helps the channel grow. But until next time, stay safe out there. Especially if you ever find yourself riding alone in the back of someone's car after midnight.